11. May 1952. Kreis Mittweida, Saxony. A pastor closes the church ledger, glances at the portrait of the president, and writes on a loose page he will hide behind the baptismal register. The commandments say, "You shall have no other gods." The party says history has already chosen one. He writes it in blue ink. He underlines, "Gods once." He puts the date and his initials. He will never speak the sentence aloud from the pulpit. He knows what it means in this village and in this year. His name is Karl. He was born in 1910. He will outlive the regime that frightens him. He will not outlive the paperwork. To understand this sentence, you have to go back 7 years to when the war is over, but the arithmetic is not. 13. May 1945. Saxony. Smoke thins over Dresden. The rubble's jagged line is everywhere. The photographs in the Bundesarchiv show streets where third floors are at eye level, roofs blown away, staircases leading to air. Women climb the ruins with handcarts and picks. They lift bricks, knock mortar loose, stack them again. Their kerchiefs are white with dust. A US Army Signal Corps photo calls them Trümmerfrauen. A Soviet occupation report calls them female cleaning brigades. The rubble takes on names the women do not get to choose. In Karl's village, the church still stands. A window is missing in the north aisle, and the organ wheezes, but the nave is intact. He returns to the parsonage in early June. There is an artillery gouge in the garden wall. The rectory's pantry is empty. His neighbor's sons are missing. His own brother is missing. He takes a broom and sweeps glass into a copper pan. In his diary he writes, "The arithmetic of absence is unsparing. The Red Army has arrived. The curfew is 19. The commandant's orders are posted on the door of the town hall. Hand over weapons. No gatherings of more than 5 people. Churches may hold service, but pastors will be listened to." Pastors already know this. In his first sermon after the capitulation, Karl keeps it short. He reads a psalm. He says, "It is finished," and then says nothing more. An orphan in a man's coat cries. Afterward, a woman with a black band on her sleeve asks if he has seen her husband. She hands him a photograph of a man in Feldgrau, smiling, holding a rabbit by the ears. Karl says he will ask around. He knows that in this year and in this village, asking around has forensic and political dimensions. He did not study at the seminary. Late May. A Soviet truck idles outside the parish hall while officers inventory furniture. The desk in the sacristy, the clock, a sewing machine, a case of candles, some books. Requisition. The commune's registry of requisition numbers sits under a paperweight. Karl signs on a line with a rubber stamp beside it. The stamp is wet and smears. The arithmetic of furniture begins. The first weeks after surrender are heavy in every German zone, but the texture is particular in each. The American occupation reports from Hesse talk about black markets and cigarettes. The British files note behavior in queues and architectures of rubble removal. The Soviet reports talk about anti-fascist democratic transformation. Karl reads none of these. He reads a ration sheet. June 1945. Ration cards are printed and handed out. Calories are counted. There are categories. You can calculate survival in columns. Manual laborers get more. Clerical workers get less. Children are listed with a separate number. Pastors are given a number that feels abstract. The hunger winter is still ahead. A man in uniform with an NKVD badge comes to the rectory. He has a list of names. He asks if Karl knows who was the Ortsgruppenleiter. He does know. It was a man who sat 2 rows back and sang bass. The man is dead. The officer asks about the teacher. He is not dead. The teacher is taken away. Karl writes in his diary, asked to tell the truth. I told the truth, felt like I was lying. Summer 1945. Displaced persons move past the village. Women in scarves, men in ill-fitting coats, the yellow star still stitched on a jacket because it has not yet been time to remove it. Soviet guards shepherd them towards a transit camp. A Polish woman rests on the church steps. The Allied intelligence summaries from that summer describe DPs in columns and quotas. Karl does not think in quotas. He looks at the woman's hands, big-knuckled, swollen, and gives her the last loaf of bread in the house. He writes, arithmetic of bread 3 days without versus 1 day with. Gave the loaf. We will be hungry, and our hunger feels like justice's shadow. Autumn 1945. The expelled arrive. They come from Silesia, from the Sudetenland, from East Prussia. Their wagons stop in the village square. A committee is formed. Rooms are counted. There is a formula. So many square meters per person. The parsonage has 2 spare rooms. 2 families move in. One family is a cobbler's widow and 2 boys from near Brieg. The other is a man who says little and keeps his hands in his pockets. He says they took the horse and the stove and his mother died on the road. His eyes go off when asked where. The arithmetic of rooms is cruel and necessary. Locals tie ropes across halls to divide space. Voices through thin walls become political questions. Who is we? Who was here first? The newcomers trade embroidered pillows for potatoes. A parish register now has new names from towns that no longer exist within the same country. An Allied Control Council directive sets guidelines for administration. The parish has its own mathematics. How many baptisms, how many funerals, how many marriages delayed by missing men. Denazification begins. In the western zones, it looks like paperwork. Questionnaires. The famous 131 questions. Spruchkammer hearings. Categories. Hauptschuldiger, Belastete, Mitlaufer, Entlastete, Mitlaufer, Entlastete. Major offender, offender. Lesser offender, follower. Exonerated. There are percentages, there are forecasts in Allied analyses. A US military government memo notes that if all followers are punished, the entire administration. In the Soviet zone, the paperwork is different. It is shorter and more decisive. The anti-fascist democratic revolution needs to move. A teacher who signed a party paper in 1937 is dismissed and sent to a sawmill. A mayor is replaced by a man who was a social democrat before 1933 and is now an anti-fascist again. The personal question becomes state policy. The mathematics of guilt intersects with the mathematics of staffing. In the Bundesarchiv, there are lists typed with new names, familiar typewriters. Karl fills out the questionnaire too. He writes, no member of the NSDAP, no membership in any organization considered hostile to the new order. He writes that he served as a medic between 1941 and 1943. He writes that he was wounded and sent home. He writes that he preached against excessive nationalism without naming it as such. He knows that adjectives can be sins. His file is stamped. He remains a pastor. November 1945. A man returns to the village in a too large uniform jacket. He is missing 3 fingers. He asks if his wife has gone with the expellees to the west. She has not. She has remarried. He stands in the churchyard and stares through the stone wall. Another man does not return. His mother places his photograph on the kitchen table and eats supper every night with a picture. Karl writes, the arithmetic of missing, 1 set at table, 1 chair always present, absence is a presence that eats. Winter 1946-47. The hunger winter. The numbers are well known. The calories are too few. Coal is short. The blizzards come. Pipes burst. The rivers freeze. Women scrape frost from window panes and burn furniture. Children faint in school. Carl writes to a cousin in the West, "Please send anything." The cousin sends a parcel with powdered milk and a tin of meat. There is a label with the letters ERP in block capitals. Marshall Plan shipments are not for the East. But church channels sometimes find ways around borders. A parcel is a letter that smells like hope. In these years, cigarettes are currency. In markets near train stations, you can buy margarine for 2 cigarettes. You can buy a wool coat for 40. You can buy quiet. In the American zone, an officer's report lists exchange rates for lucky strikes. In the Soviet zone, cigarettes circulate quietly too. The arithmetic of barter is everywhere. Carl trades a pocket watch for potatoes. His wife cries. It was his father's watch. He says it was an instrument for measuring time. Time is heavy now, and potatoes are lighter but more necessary. Spring 1946. The communists and social democrats in the Soviet zone are told to merge. In April, they become the Socialist Unity Party, SED. Carl goes to a meeting where a party official explains the anti-fascist democratic order. He nods while keeping his face neutral. He hears that children will be protected from reactionary poison. He knows that the confirmation classes will be watched. In the West, denazification proceeds toward amnesty and reintegration. In Hesse, Karl's brother Hans fills out the 131 questions. He had been a clerk in a district office. He had not joined the party. He had joined the Civil Service League. He is called a Mitläufer, a follower. He is fined 3 months' salary. He returns to his desk. The denazification file from Kassel has a stamp that says "Final." Carl reads a letter that says nothing of guilt but speaks of new office chairs and a rumor of contracts. The mathematics of guilt is becoming the mathematics of growth. Late 1946. Church bells ring. The congregations sing. The church is full, for hunger turns people to sanctuaries with stoves. Carl preaches on Joseph and grain. He reads from a parish register to confirm that a boy was baptized in 1930 and is now dead at the front. He signs death certificates for men who have not been found. He studies the sharp corners of the inked letters. He stores the registers in the safest cupboard he has, and in the back of his head, he is calculating what will happen if someone comes and asks for a list of names. He knows that lists are dangerous. June 1948. The currency reform in the West. The photographs show people smiling, holding new banknotes. The West begins to move. The Marshall Plan funnels dollars, machines, wheat, and expertise to the zones that will become the Federal Republic. The occupation reports talk about optimism. The word Wirtschaftswunder will come later. The East adopts a new Mark II, but replaces it under different conditions. Reparations to the Soviet Union continue. Factories are dismantled, machines loaded onto trains. The arithmetic of dismantling is felt in empty halls. Carl visits a member of his congregation who worked at a factory that now stands with doors locked. He stares at the padlock and thinks of bolts that were made here to hold bridges together. Now the bolts are missing too. Autumn, 1948. Radios whisper. In the East, the radio says the people's democracies advance. In the West, RIAS broadcasts over Berlin the sound of advertisements for refrigerators. Carl's cousin writes that he has a new job at a plant that makes metal fittings for refrigerators. He tells Carl about a day trip to see a new apartment building with an elevator. He writes the word Aufzug and laughs. Carl writes back. He writes about the youth who come to him for confirmation. He writes about the pressure to join the Free German Youth. He writes that the children come to the parish hall with their FDJ scarves in their satchels and put them back on when they leave. January 1949. The state, soon to be German Democratic Republic, organizes, in the villages and in the minds of people who live in them. Young pioneers in neckerchiefs learn songs with new lyrics. The FDJ organizes dances. There are posters of smiling workers with their arms around tractors. In the city, the police watch men who talk too much. The Ministry for State Security, the Stasi, will be founded in 1950. Its files will have sections for church matters. Its informants will be fathers and altar servers, neighbors and choir members. The archive will be meticulous. The archive will become a confession everyone is forced to give. 1950. The Stasi is the new institution whose purpose is to know. The founding decree is dry. The practice is not. An informant is recruited in Karl's village. The informant is given a code name. The file will later identify him as Im Gärtner. He sells seed potatoes. He sits in the fourth pew. He seems to have a thick Bible. He reports that Pastor K's sermons are reactionary, with an emphasis on personal conscience. The report notes that his wife weeps easily. The report notes that the pastor writes late into the night. This is how compromise begins, quietly. Measured in notes slipped into envelopes. Karl's sermons change shape. He reads more scripture and says fewer adjectives. He does not pray for leaders. He prays for those in responsibility. He writes in his prayer book a note, "Father, forgive me when silence makes me complicit." He writes, "The mathematics of silence, subtracting words to save bodies." 1951. The campaign accelerates. The Junge Gemeinde, the Protestant youth group that meets in bright rooms with tea and Bible verses, is labeled a tool of imperialist agents. Posters appear. Kampf dem Aberglauben. Fight superstition. The school removes the crucifix, and the headmaster, who was a Mitlaufer 10 years ago and now is a block warden for the party, walks the corridors with his head high. There are new ceremonies. The Jugendweihe. Young people will pledge themselves to socialist ideals, not to Christ. The arithmetic of initiation rites is revised. Karl runs confirmation classes anyway. He meets the children at 6 in the morning in the sacristy by candlelight. He tells them that faith is not illegal. He does not say that faith under surveillance becomes something else. He knows that if a public invitation is printed, people will come like moths around a lamp, as one police report warned. He keeps lists in pencil. He erases the lists after the service. 11. May 1952. He preaches under a portrait of the president. He says, "Render unto Caesar," and hears the intake of breath of an old man in the third pew. After the sermon, after the parishioners have left, he writes his dangerous sentence and places it behind the register. He can feel the paper's dry edge under his fingers. He is aware of history as a person who takes notes. A week later, 2 boys from the Jugendweihe class come to his door at night with their caps in their hands. They whisper, "We want to be confirmed." He nods and sets the date for a weekday evening. He tells them to tell no one. He knows they will be asked at school. He knows they will hedge. He writes on a scrap of paper the verse they will memorize. He burns the scrap after they leave. The mathematics of risk is always provisional. An internal report from the Bezirksbehörde der Deutschen Volkspolizei for 1952 notes, "The influence of reactionary clergymen remains notable, particularly on youth. It is necessary to continue ideological training. The church must be neutralized." The word used is unschädlich machen, make harmless, a verb with veterinary connotations. The word sticks in the throat. Pastors are called in for conversations. They are told they speak too often about sin. They are told this demoralizes the populace. Karl is told he is not to provoke. He signs a paper acknowledging he has been warned. He does not promise. In June, a man named Otto, who once directed the choir, is arrested. He is accused of distributing a leaflet that asked for free elections. The Stasi file says he confessed. The confession is typed. It uses phrases he would not use. The arithmetic of confession under compulsion becomes a science in this period. The names in the files and the names in the prayer books form intersecting sets. The West is not a distant abstraction. Letters arrive with stamps showing new offices and white modernist buildings. The Bundesarchiv houses photographs of factories with banners reading Marshall Plan Hilft. Karl's cousin in Kassel writes that the plant has a new press, that orders are steady, that he has purchased a bicycle which he locks to a pole when shopping because there are now thieves again, which seems to him like a sign of normal life. He writes that school textbooks speak of us and them. He writes that their us means everyone who suffered. He does not write everyone who did, though he would not deny it if asked by the right person. The arithmetic of memory is not a ledger, but people pretend it is. Karl sees the East's version of memory. Monuments are erected to victims of fascism without naming Jews. Names of dead anti-fascists are engraved in stone. A Jewish survivor passes through the village in 1951 looking for the names of her parents' killers. She is told the killers were the system. The system is not a person. Karl pulls the baptism register for the year 1899. He looks up a surname that is rare and finds a family. He writes the address of the house where they once lived. He knows the occupant now is a family who fled from the East. He writes his notes on a separate paper and tears it up after the woman leaves. He keeps the torn pieces until the next time the oven is lit. Spring 1953. The campaign against the Junge Gemeinde peaks. The party press calls it illegal. Boys are suspended from school for attending. Girls are threatened with expulsion from teacher training programs. The ministry's circular is dry. The consequences are not. BSTU files show disciplinary measures with the phrase Beispielgebend hart, exemplarily hard. Pastors organize quiet resistance. They hold classes under other names. Sprachkreis, Literaturkreis. They pray at the beginning and end and say to any visitor that no political content is discussed. 17. June 1953. The protests begin in Berlin at Stalinallee and move outward like a tremor. In Halle and Leipzig, workers stop work. They spill into streets. They say, "We want bread and free elections." In Karlstown, the factory whistles blow wrong in the morning. People look up from their bread and wonder if there is a fire. A policeman rides his bicycle faster than usual. At noon, some men stand in the square with their hands in their pockets, and then take their hands out and raise them and shout and then put them back in. The Soviet tanks move. The protests end. The arrests begin. Karl rings the church bell once, a deep single note that says nothing and everything. The aftermath is documented. Occupation Report, Soviet Control Commission, June 1953, lists numbers of arrestees. Betriebsberichte from factories list the number of those who spoke and those who remained silent. The arithmetic of fear is updated in pencil. Karl visits a woman whose husband was taken and tells her to prepare a package. He knows what to put in it. Matches, bread, a shirt without buttons, soap. He knows where to bring it. He knows the guard who will take it. The guard is an altar boy from before. The guard is a function. He looks away as he takes the package. He is not the worst person in his generation. This is not a story with theatre villains. It is a story of systems. After the uprising, the state softens its treatment of the Junge Gemeinde slightly. The campaign tones down. Youth are allowed to attend if they avoid political agitation. The word political has expanding definitions. A confirmation is political if the boy stands up too straight. A youth Bible circle is political if they pray for Poland. Karl continues to teach. He stops writing names anywhere but in his head. 1954. The Jugendway becomes standard. The party instructs schools to promote it. Promises of textbooks, of bicycle parts, of tickets to a cinema arrive for those who participate. Confirmation is harder to arrange, but not impossible. Families invent rituals. Boys go to the factory in the morning and to the church at dusk. Girls recite one pledge in public and whisper another in private. The arithmetic of duplicity enters a generation's bones. The West prospers. In 1955, the Bundesrepublik joins NATO. Streets are paved. Deutsche Marks clink in cash drawers. Ludwig Erhard smiles under heavy glasses. School books are revised. Public commemorations emphasize the firestorm in Hamburg, the expulsion from Pomerania, the hunger winter. They list suffering. They picture ruins. They say, "Never again war." The arithmetic of guilt is rephrased as the arithmetic of loss. An Allied commentary on German memory notes with clinical tone. While public discourse acknowledges Nazi crimes, societal focus remains on German victimhood, especially in non-urban settings. The report is not wrong, and it is not complete. Karl reads Western brochures when they arrive in a relative's parcel. He is grateful for the soap. He is wary of the new story. He does not think he is a victim. He knows victims. He has seen the numbers on forearms and the scars on backs. He has read letters returned with "address unknown." He has buried a skull found in a field and said the burial words without knowing whether the person was German or Russian or Polish or a forced laborer who fell and was simply placed in a hole. He says the same words because under the earth categories blur. The years pass and the files thicken. 1957. Karl meets a family who asks if they must choose between Jugendway and confirmation. He says no if you are careful. He helps them arrange a quiet confirmation on a Saturday morning in November. He instructs their boy to attend the Jugendway with a straight face and not to sing loudly. He tells them that bravery is sometimes a whisper. He tells them that compromise is not always betrayal. He knows different. He says it anyway. The files contain transcripts of conversations between pastors and Stasi officers. The pastors are described as good Germans with backward notions. The officers say things like, "Your covenant makes you dependent on foreign powers." The pastors say nothing. Their silence is recorded as non-cooperative. Their silence is also a prayer. 1961. The wall goes up in August. The day before it is built, Karl's brother Hans visits. They drink coffee. They stand by the garden wall where the artillery gouge has not been repaired, out of habit, out of a sense that some wounds explain things better than words. They do not talk about politics long. They talk about children. The next morning, Hans goes back, and the phone rings less often after that. Letters are slower and stop talking about refrigerators. On the radio, RIAS becomes more than a station. It is a line. The wall changes the arithmetic of escape. It changes the church's work. Pastoral visits to hospitals across the line end. The exchange of parcels slows. Karl's cousin no longer visits and tells stories about purchases. The rector in Berlin writes that more young people are attending Monday prayers. The files say that in October 1961, students were asked to denounce classmates who went to prayer meetings. Some refused, some denounced. Those who denounced do not sleep better. Those who refused do not either. The arithmetic of conscience does not yield neat sums. 1962. The East German authorities publish a new constitution in 1968 that makes the state's atheism plain and cleanse the legal framework to match the practice. Before that, the atheism campaigns are piecemeal. departmental. They target schoolrooms and textbooks. They target birth, marriage, and death. They offer civil ceremonies with flowers and certificates. Churches are left with fewer public spaces and more private baptisms. Karl baptizes a child in the kitchen on a Wednesday. He uses a teacup. He writes the name in the register and locks the ledger. He knows that a ledger is a front line. The years accumulate. 1976. Wolf Biermann is expatriated. There are petitions. Karl does not sign. He is not a man of leaflets. He preaches a sermon on prophets that mentions no names. He receives a visit from a young man with hair too long who asks why he did not sign. He says because words that fructify in the West may make us barren here. The young man leaves angry. He was not wrong. Neither was Karl. The arithmetic of engagement in authoritarian systems generates remainders. In the West, the narrative continues, faster now. Factories expand. Apartments get full kitchens. A new generation grows up with butter in the fridge and cars in the driveway. The school books change again. They begin to show photographs from the camps, raw and explicit. They require reflection essays. The public discourse shifts from German suffering to German responsibility. The families find ways to live with both. Oral histories recorded in the 1980s are full of phrases that begin with, "We did not know," and end with, "We knew something." The mathematics of guilt remains an open set. In the East, the church becomes a room with many uses. Prayer meetings, peace circles, women's groups that talk about groceries, boys' groups that talk about rock music. The words for and against are no longer the only ways to speak. Between becomes a place to stand. The state suspects between more than either extreme. It sends more IMs. The files grow. The files say, Pastor K is active. They say, Pastor K is active. Is not hostile, but his theology is incorrect. The phrase, incorrect theology, is a masterpiece of bureaucratic contempt. In the parsonage, in November 1978, Karl opens a notebook. He writes about a woman who came to ask if the church would bury her father who had been a party member. He tells her yes. He writes that funerals are not for sorting the good from the bad. He writes that death is a category that resets other categories. He writes that he will not preach lies. He writes that he will not preach everything he believes. He writes, the arithmetic of funerals, one coffin, many stories, one earth. The files for his village show that in 1980, the Stasi considered recruiting him. The recruitment advocate wrote, the subject has influence and access, but is unreliable. The upper-level officer wrote, place on observation list only. Probably someone, somewhere, protected him by writing a simple sentence that pushed him out of the category of recruitable. The mathematics of survival include strangers' lines in folders you will never see. The church in Leipzig becomes something larger in 1982. The prayers for peace on Mondays begin to draw more than the faithful. Men in denim jackets with handwritten signs stand next to pensioners with old hymnals. The petitions multiply. In Karl's parish, similar gatherings are smaller. They are quieter. He helps a young pastor plan a service where a Bible text will be read and a candle lit for conscientious objectors. He knows the word conscientious has a meaning the state finds indecent. He knows the Stasi report will say hostile negative. He knows he is too old to be dangerous. He smiles when he writes that, because it is not true. 1985. The wall still stands. The grocery shelves are still unevenly stocked. SED cadres still give speeches with heavy consonants. The West has home computers now. The East has typewriters with index cards. The police can match to the correct ribbon. The arithmetic of fear sits like dust on porcelain. 1989. The years that had felt like a weight become a wave. Monday, prayers grow. Names of cities are shouted. Leipzig, Plauen, the army does not shoot. The country changes. Files are flown to the incinerator and saved by people who break the door. The archive becomes physical and public and personal. The files are opened. The names are read. Oxidized paper has a bitter smell. The reading rooms acquire silent rules and forms, as if to impose order on what the papers unleash. Karl is almost 80. He goes to the office where the files are kept and asks if there is a file on him. There is. It has a number. It has many numbers. The clerk with small glasses locates 3 volumes. She hands them to him as if they were a refectory loaf to be cut. He reads his name in the third person. He reads the dates like tombstones. He reads the code name of the man from the 4th pew. He does not recognize it, and then does. He closes the file gently. The clerk looks away, because this is a moment she sees daily and still cannot make routine. He returns to the parsonage and opens the cupboard where the parish registers are stored. He takes out the baptism register from 1939. It has the name of a man who joined the party in 1941 and was drowned in 1943. He looks at the ink. He feels the old compulsion to protect the registers by hiding them. The compulsion becomes irrelevant. He laughs quietly. The West and East become one country. Denazification is long over. A different purge begins. The guilt now is for collaboration with the Stasi. The categories are new: Täter, Opfer, IM, Betroffener, perpetrator, victim, informant, affected. New Sprüchkammern meet in public halls and in editorials and in private kitchens. People revise their pasts again. The mathematics of guilt waits on the table like an unfriendly guest. Karl returns to his notebook in December 1990. He writes his dangerous sentence again, the one from 1952, in quotation marks this time, as if quoting someone else. The commandments say, "You shall have no other gods." The party says, "History has already chosen one." He adds, "We all chose many. We chose work, safety, family, tranquility, pride, West, East. We have the right to choose wrongly, but we do not have the right to lie about it afterwards." He writes about the first years after the war. He writes about the expelled persons who came with nothing and made tables. He writes about the DPs with a star who came with nothing and kept walking. He writes about the nights of hunger and the watch he traded. He writes about denazification like an arithmetic problem with too many unknowns and a pragmatic answer that kept files and filled chairs. He writes about his brother Hans, the Mitläufer, who became a good civil servant and never spoke about the years between 1933 and 1942 in sentences with verbs. He writes about the West school books that taught children about the victims with clarity and a distance, and the East school books that named victims anti-fascists, and thereby erased some and misnamed others. He writes, "I did small resistances and small compromises. I did not become a hero. I did not become a coward. The mathematics of my days is a ledger that does not balance but still records." He writes, still, about bread, about ration cards that taught him the weight of numbers and what they hide, about the black market that taught him that morals are easier when you are not hungry, about the cigarette that bought him a broom, about a woman who gave him a loaf and told him to stop talking about God for once and eat, about the morning he baptized a child with a teacup and wrote quietly "done" in the margin and underlined it twice. About the afternoon he opened a door to a man with a name he did not know and recognized the rhythm of his questions and never learned the man's real name, which was in a file. He writes about paperwork. He writes about how the war after the war was waged with lists and registers and questionnaires and ration cards and denunciations and petitions and denials and baptisms written in long, slow letters. He writes about the arithmetic of rooms where an extra bed meant a history. He writes about the arithmetic of guilt, where the sums always ran into words, context, narrow path, responsibility. He writes about the arithmetic of memory, where subtraction is the only way to foster addition, and yet subtraction shakes the sum. He writes about the line he wrote in 1952. He feels the ink again. He understands now that he was wrong about one thing. History does not choose gods. People do. They choose institutions and meanings and then learn to bow. He bows now, but not to a portrait. He places his notebook in the drawer. He takes the 1952 note from behind the register and lays it next to the new one. He notices the ink has browned. He notices his hand shook less in 1952. He smiles and says out loud a sentence that does not become a sermon. The mathematics of my life is illegible without those papers. Outside the parsonage window, the street is quieter. There are new cars. The children wear colours. The village is small.